Hey everyone, welcome to the December edition of the Video VERT Alert. I'm Oliver Lavery, the Director of Security Research and Development at nCircle, and this is Tyler Reguly.
Yep, I'm Tyler, Technical Manager of same thing that Oliver's the Director of.
There you go. So Tyler, without further ado, why don't we get into it for this month? We've got a lot to cover. This would be the first year that Microsoft's gone over 100 bulletins and 17 in December.
Yeah, with 40 CVEs, it's a lot of really big numbers.
Yep, but I think the gist of this is that, very few of them are a big deal. So let's go through and see what there is. So how about MS10-90?
Yeah, 090 is that update that you expect every single month, the update of IE. It's kind of becoming a regular. There's not a whole lot to talk about there, except that the public zero-day that's been going around, it's in all of the exploit frameworks at this point, is being patched. Hasn't been out for very long, so it's a pretty good turnaround time on Microsoft's part.
Can you talk a little bit about the zero-day?
Yeah, it's CSS, cascading style sheets, memory corruption, remote code execution.
So that's significant.
Yeah, if you're running IE8, your risk is greatly reduced because newer is always better, and IE8 has all the built-in protections like dep and whatnot. So
yeah, but a lot of users are still on older browser. So there's a reason that
people with pirated versions of Windows and IE6.
Yep. Okay, how about MS10-091, vulnerabilities in OpenType, yet again?
Yeah, more OpenType font stuff, EOP to system, escalation of privileges. It's important to note that the greatest attack vector here is likely to be browsing a file share, but that only works against Vista and newer, because there's no preview functionality on XP in 2003.
But Microsoft lists this as remote code execution, so it's not in a web page context?
No, it's browsing system shares and doing the preview.
Right. OpenType font on a network share.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of remote code execution, but not as bad as it sounds. How about MS10-092, vulnerability in task scheduler could allow elevation of privilege?
Yeah, this was the third vulnerability that came out of Stuxnet. This was the one that was used on Vista and newer systems for account elevation, and we're finally seeing it patched.
Which is a good thing, right? Because, these aren't really necessarily a huge deal in the context of a typical hacker scenario, but for malware, they can be a real force multiplier.
Yeah, definitely. So this is there were 3 0-days that were discovered with Stuxnet, and this is the third one being patched, so we're done there.
So for people who are worried about Stuxnet, I know we hear that question a lot. This is, when you should install.
Yep.
MS10-093, vulnerability in Windows Movie Maker could allow remote code execution.
So we get into a chain of, I think it's the next 5 of them here, which is Microsoft cleaning up some of the DLL preloading issues. So most people are familiar about them. They've really been talked about to death at this point. But we see Movie Maker and Media Encoder, some Windows Live components, the code they use, the Windows address book, and Internet Connection Sign-Up Wizard, for all the people who are worried about that software.
I didn't realize that was still in Windows.
Only, I think, XP and 2003.
Yeah, it's Vista 2008, everything else since isn't effective.
Yeah.
Right.
So DLL preloading, you have a malicious file on a share somewhere, WebDAV share or an SMB share, that because of the order that Windows loads DLLs, when something else in that share gets executed, the malicious DLL gets run.
Yeah, and that's because Windows will search the current working directory, which often for a program will be where a file is opened from.
Yeah.
So it'll pick up the wrong DLL, and that DLL can do whatever it likes. It's easy, you don't need to write shellcode, nothing to write a DLL. But not really a huge deal in all of those attack vectors. You're not really talking about a file format that's incredibly common, and nobody's going to be rushing to open up
Windows Movie Maker file.
Exactly, or Internet Connection Sign-Up Wizard files from a file share. Okay, how about let's skip through all of those then, and then go to MS10-098. This is the kernel mode driver, EOP.
Yeah, Win32k.sys. I think it's the second time we're seeing it patched this year.
Yeah.
I think 073 perhaps was the other one that patched it. So we're seeing it pop up again, and yeah, again, you're going from regular account up to system level.
Yep. So again, similar to the Stuxnet one we talked about.
Yeah, more of the same.
Malware, not that useful in a human attack scenario, but still relevant. Shared systems, shared servers.
Yep.
Using Citrix or whatnot. MS10-099, vulnerability in routing and remote access. Another DOP.
Yeah, so XP, 2K3 are your affected platforms here. It's a little bit misleading because routing and remote access, I would think it was some sort of remote attack. It's not. It's actually a local attack that, again, allows you to elevate your privileges. So
yeah.
More of the same. There's a lot of common themes here with, elevation of privileges, and you'll see some DOS coming up in the next few. So
yeah, that's right. It's really kind of, I guess, trying to close out the year for Microsoft and get rid of some outstanding issues.
Like I was saying earlier, it's kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel to clean up what they can.
Yeah, lots of vulnerabilities, but very few high-risk ones. MS10-100, vulnerability in consent user interface, could allow elevation of privilege. So first of all, what's the consent user interface?
With UAC, the consent user interface is the UI that pops up when you go to perform an administrative task.
Right. Blacks out the background and you get the
you
big
get the
red
little
button.
pop-up box. Are you sure you want to perform this task? It's a really, really lousy way to celebrate 100 vulnerabilities. There's not a whole lot to say again beyond the fact that it's another escalation of privilege.
And you already have to have SE impersonate privilege, which is a powerful privilege to be able to
you're looking at a limited number of accounts that are able to go up to, I believe it's local system is the account that you get up to, and you have to have that permission in order to do it.
Which pretty much already means you're an administrator, because it means you can impersonate other users, right?
Yeah.
It's still kind of, I don't know, it's a little ironic that the consent user interface meant to make Windows more secure lets you get to the local system. But such is life, I guess.
Yep.
MS10-101, the vulnerability in Windows Net Logon service. It's a DOS.
This has got to be the most convoluted vulnerability that I've seen in quite a while. First of all, the server has to be domain controller. And the attacker has to have administrative privileges on a machine that's on the domain.
Okay.
And then you can launch a denial of service attack. So as long as you meet all of the criteria, which, I mean, is a likely setting in a lot of places.
Yeah, lots of engineers are given admin on their own machines, or technical staff, right? It's not going to be, the girl in accounting, the guy in accounting, but,
So, I mean, it exists, possible. But, you're looking at a denial service in the end.
And what's the impact of the DOS? You can take down the domain controller?
Yeah, you take down the system.
So that's not insignificant. It's not brutal, but it's not insignificant. Vulnerability in Hyper-V could allow denial of service. I mean, this is interesting just because it's Hyper-V, right?
Yeah, I think the big thing here is that what we're talking about is, I believe it's the VM bus is the communication mechanism between the guest operating system and the host operating system. And if you have administrative access to the guest, you can take down the host, which means taking down all the other guests. So if you get into, some sort of shared hosting environment where you've got multiple machines running and you're the administrator on one, you can actually take everybody else on that same system offline. Yeah,
that's really significant. I mean, I guess Hyper-V is not being used for public clouds much yet, but this is exactly the kind of thing we worry about in a public cloud scenario where there's improper sandboxing of the different users, and one user who's, slightly malicious can take down the entire cloud, or a segment of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a big one, just not in very common situations. Hyper-V is pretty new. Not being used in those situations yet. And now, strangely, we get back to a couple of remote code executions. MS10-103, Microsoft Publisher could allow remote code execution. So, what's Microsoft Publisher?
Can we call it Adobe Light? Desktop publishing software. I know, like I said, I used it in high school for our high school newspaper. But how many people are actually using it and opening publisher files?
Probably not a huge number. But this one can be from a publisher file hosted on the internet, right? So, I mean, spear phishing, someone could be tricked into clicking a link and just happen to have publisher installed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's Office is one of those, you're always going to have it showing up things, and once again, we have it showing up here.
But I guess it's not like part of Office by default, which is why it's only rated as important.
Yeah.
That makes sense. MS10-104, vulnerability in Microsoft SharePoint could allow remote code execution.
Yeah, so we got code execution on a listening service, which, you'd think would rate a little more than an important, but it's not on by default in most production environments. So it's not a service that most people are likely to run either.
Yeah, but more than 103. I mean, this people should pay attention to, right?
Yeah.
SharePoint's now become fairly critical infrastructure for a lot of
Should
businesses.
definitely be patching it if you have SharePoint.
Yeah.
But again, the worst case scenario too is that the code runs in the privileges of guest.
Yeah, okay, that's not as bad unless you couple it with EOP vulnerability.
Then you bring in one of the other ones
right?
from this month, and you start chaining them together, and away you go.
Yeah. MS10-105 Microsoft Office graphics filters could allow for remote code execution. So we were talking about this one before, right?
Yeah, so you're talking about opening up an Office document in pretty much any of your Office programs, and you're owned. It's important to note though that with 2007 and 2010, Office 2007, Office 2010 that is, that these filters are actually disabled by default. They're disabled, the support for them has been shut down, so you don't really have an attack vector into the newer software, which, kind of like the IU one, run the latest and greatest.
Yeah, although this one's still probably significant for enterprises, right? I mean, a lot of enterprises don't upgrade. I still get people emailing me doc files.
There's a lot of people still using Office 2003, and in part because of the ribbon.
And this one for 2003, I mean, that's pretty killer. Open an Office document and lose control of your computer. Worth paying attention to. I don't know. I'd argue that maybe it should be rated a little bit more than important. And then last but, well, kind of least, MS10-106. The vulnerability in Microsoft Exchange Server could allow denial of service.
Yeah, so we got our third denial of service here, and we're talking about an RPC request being sent over from an authenticated user. Seems to be a common theme with the denial of service, that we're talking about authenticated users in all the cases of the DOS. And yeah, you can send the Exchange server into an infinite loop.
Now, whenever I hear the word Exchange server, I get a little scared. So if I'm running a business, the idea that someone can just take down Exchange, I mean, that's some lost productivity and some lost money. What's like the mitigating factors for this one? Why isn't it only rated moderate?
I think because we're talking about actual RPC, and I mean, in a perfect world, you're probably going to have your RPC interfaces firewalled to some extent. Even possibly internally. I would hope that they're not just sitting out there for everyone to start querying.
Having done security assessments, you'd be surprised how often they are, actually.
But then you're talking about an authenticated attacker. You're actually authenticating to send the command, so likely you're going to appear in the logs somewhere. Right. So unless you're looking to lose your job, it's probably not going to be at the top of your list of things to do to trash the company.
But it's a pretty effective way to get fired.
Yeah, good way to shut things down temporarily.
Yeah, so I mean that's significant. Well, I think that's it for this month. Thanks, Tyler.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and we'll see you in 2011.
Yeah, have a good New Year.